So in Tai Chi, we talk about yin and yang. It's the law of the opposites, right? So if we apply that to up and down, in physics, what you have is gravity, and from the earth pushing up into you, you have what's called the ground reaction force. So when we're in what's termed central equilibrium, that's when you are basically equalizing those two forces within your body, if that makes sense. I don't think I expressed that very well. But basically, you can sense simultaneously that there's both an up sense within your body as well as there being a down sense. Right, so I talked about that in the first video with the up and down movements that we were doing with the flying pattern. But let's get a little more focused on the center, right? Center of gravity, which you can think of as ball, right? So your dantien. So the basic movement of your dantien is horizontal rotation and rotation in the sagittal plane this way. So forward and backwards in the horizontal. Of course, if you combine those two movements, then you can have rotation in any direction. So if I want to turn my body clockwise, I imagine that I start to rotate the ball clockwise, and then I kind of feel something within my core muscles that starts to move me in that direction. So this hip crease is going to draw in a little bit, right? So it's going to close. If I'm turning to the right, my right hip crease is closing while my left hip crease is opening, right? So it's the same, go the other way. I want to organize myself for the most part, keeping my hips and my shoulders in the form of a rectangle, right? So just a little bit of turning, turning, turning. And then I'm going to start to focus on the ground. So as I turn, I want to feel that I can use the ground a little bit to initiate the turn. Could be a light pressing into the ground. Right? So in the Tai Chi classics, we say that Tai Chi classics state that the chi, or the force, moves up from the ground and it gets transmitted through the legs. And then it comes to your waist, where it's steered into the back, into your spine. And then it gets steered into the arms and manifested in the hands. So in terms of kinesiology, physical therapy, we would just basically call this the kinetic chain, right? So if I'm opening a heavy door, I want to feel that force can come up from the ground through my legs, and then I can feel big muscles working as I push something heavy. Don't want to just feel like it's coming from my arms. So back to the rotation, I'm feeling it comes from my legs, right? Comes from the ground, comes from the ground. I'm just going to start to let my arms swing a little bit. You can certainly be floppy, but I don't encourage my students to get too floppy, because I want you to feel that your arms are connected to your bodies. So I like to think that I'm in water, right? So as I turn, this movement is coming from the ground, through my legs, through my waist, through my spine, and then it comes into my hands. And I can slow it down and go a little wider in my stance, and I can start to turn it into a circular pattern. Right, so I'll feel rotation in my center, rotation. I feel my hips change the direction. Right, then I could change the plane of the movement. Right, so in Chen style, Tai Chi, this would be called silk reeling. Then I could focus on the force coming up from the ground, right? So I link my feet to my hands, right? So if I were to do 2 hands, it might look something like this, or I could do something like that. There's tons of videos out there with people doing beautiful Tai Chi movement. And I encourage you to follow along, but at the same time, I want you to shut the video off and practice without watching someone, right? Because if all you do is you imitate, you never really sink into your body and start to learn that internal self-image that's ultimately going to help you get to where you want to go, wherever that might be. So back to this movement of rotation of my center, I'm just going to go real slow with the movement and move into an expression of closing and opening. Right, so I start feeling my center turning, and it's pulling the attention, my energy in, and then I expand. Right, so the energy pulls in through my arms into my center, and then I bring it out to my hands. While I'm doing this, of course, I feel the ground, right? So I feel my feet are connected into the ground. Right, so it's kind of like I'm pulling myself away from the ground. Everything is, I'm pulling towards my middle, and then I expand. Everything goes away from my middle. Pull everything in, and then away from the center. Really take your time to go slowly when you do some of these movements, so you can distinguish, whether you're getting movement from here, right? Which is when my hands are here, I'm really thinking about the center of my body, the center of gravity. So between my hands here, it's not just the front that I'm focusing on. So as you're turning, you want to feel that it's lower than your lower back, right? So you want to feel like there's a sense that you're not engaging your lower back muscles, that your hips are relaxing, that your pelvic floor is doing something. That's the space between your sitting bones, right? And maybe a little bit of movement in the lower back, but the main thing with the lower back is you want it to open, right? So, and that's what I talked about before, is if you exaggerate by bringing your elbows forward, right? Maybe tuck your tail to exaggerate, you'll feel that it opens up the lower back, right? So as you let that come back to a more neutral posture, you can feel that your lower back could stay open while your tail essentially goes down or slightly back. You don't want to practice with your tail tucked under. I know I see some people doing that, but that's not natural movement if you're doing that. So let's stop there, and we'll revisit this at some point.